science, and faith. And it's my pleasure now to introduce one of our speakers, Ms. Shruti Kapil, who's sat here in the middle. So Shruti heads the Security and Mutual Dependence Desk at the center, where she examines both traditional and non-traditional security concerns through a security and interdependence lens. At the ICFS, she also leads India's water security project. The first part of the water security project will be launched in end of March, so yeah, stay tuned and keep in touch. And with a background in national security and global affairs, Shruti brings on an interdisciplinary approach to addressing India's water crisis. She has experience across think tanks, public and private sectors. So that's enough about Shruti's background, and over to you.
Well, thank you, Celia, for the kind introduction. Just a slight change in the format. I'm the chair today, and I've got two speakers here. Good morning and welcome everyone to today's session. It's my pleasure to open this fireside chat on one of the most urgent and consequential topics of our time. The role of AI in harnessing the role of AI for water resilience and sustainable growth. I want to start with introducing our esteemed speakers. Please join me in welcoming our first speaker, David Wood. Dr. David Wood is a fellow at the center. He co-founded Symbian in 1998, which pioneered the smartphone industry. He has since exited and now spends his time writing and speaking on all things technology, especially focusing on long-term trends of AI, technology, and regulation. In 2009, he was included in T3's list of 100 most people in technology. David. Our second speaker is Sujit Nair. Sujit is the co-founder of Network for Humanity and co-creator of Beacon, a decentralized protocol powering peer-to-peer agentic native digital economies. He led the global digital energy grid vision with International Energy Agency, advancing an interoperable digital backbone for clean, flexible power systems. His work spans key digital public infrastructure pillars, co-conceptualizing ONDC enabling networks like Namaya 3 and the Kenya One network. He has also contributed to Aadhaar's deduplication infrastructure and pioneered the National Common Mobility Card. He's also co-architect of the Unified Bharat e-Charge initiative and a special invitee to the Forum of Regulators for a unified AI-driven energy economy. Welcome, Sujit. Now, let me quickly explain the format for today's session. We'll have opening remarks from both our speakers, 5 minutes each, which will be followed by a moderated conversation where we'll engage and, explore some themes in the topic. We will then move on to audience Q&A, which will be for 15 minutes. And then we'll have the closing remarks from both our speakers and the conclusion. And with that, I want to start with the framing of the conversation. Why are we here today? Why are we even talking about this? Now, water is no longer an environmental or developmental concern, not just an environmental and developmental concern. It is a structural determinant of global stability. What we are witnessing around the world is too much water in some areas, too little in others, and increasingly water that is too polluted to be consumed. Now, when water systems destabilize, the ripple effects extend beyond borders. Water is deeply connected to trade, migration, climate systems, and economic growth. And over 700 million people are projected to be displaced because of water scarcity by 2030, according to UNICEF. So what we're facing is not a localized scarcity issue. It is a global risk multiplier. Now, why is India important in all of this? India is home to 1.4 billion people, so nearly 1/6 of humanity. It is one of the fastest growing major economies and poised to become the third largest in the next 2.5 to 3 years. So its trajectory matters globally. Why? Because India is deeply embedded in global supply chains, food and agricultural markets, pharmaceutical and manufacturing networks, technology and digital innovation ecosystems, and regional geopolitical dynamics. Now, if India thrives sustainably, it contributes to global economic prosperity. In short, India is too big and too significant for the world to not understand. And water security is central to this equation. And this is precisely why the International Center for Sustainability has undertook a comprehensive water security research focused on India. There are two parts of this research. The first part addresses the water security status of India, which is a diagnostic report. The second part of the report focuses on solutions and recommendations. It outlines not only what is happening in the country now, but what could go wrong if there is delay in actions. Now, on the back of this research, a question really emerged. What are the tools there to really strengthen water resilience in the country? And this brings us to artificial intelligence. In this context, can the water sector become a key beneficiary of India's AI mission? And if so, how do we strategically harness that potential? And with that framing, I would now like to invite our speakers for their opening reflections. David, would you like to go first? You've got 5 minutes.
Thank you. Let's have my slides back up on the screen, please. So I'm a futurist, though I must say it's never been harder to predict the future. As a futurist, we want to point out that the near future might be very different from how we are naively expecting it. There are likely to be many changes coming soon, and if we get it right, we can move away from the image on the left side here, where we've been intelligent but not wise, and where we are stressing nature in terrible ways. But if we get it right, we have a very much more sustainable future ahead. Sustainability in the environment and sustainability in human flourishing. But as I said, if we try and anticipate even 1 week ahead, it's uncertain nowadays. There are changes in politics and geopolitics, and especially in technology, which catch us out the whole time. But despite this uncertainty, I want to say there are some important trends. So I want to shed some more light on this picture and point out some trends which I believe will hold true in the next few years, regardless of anything else happening. Trend number one is for AI. We have not seen anything yet compared to what is ahead. AI capability is continually improving, and I know it's quite popular these days to say AI has hit a wall and won't progress any further, and that it's been overhyped. Well, I disagree fundamentally, and later, if you like, I could talk to you individually. I see there's at least 12 reasons to expect AI to be very significantly more capable in a few years than it is today. What this means, it's also going to be used more widely in more areas of our lives, more applications. We will have AI present, either sometimes as a welcome advisor, sometimes as an unwelcome spy. But AI is not just going to be changing our lives. AI is going to be changing technology, and this is where it really gets interesting for water and sustainable growth. AI is going to provide the intelligence so there can be big leaps forward in various fields, such as nanotech, the study and understanding and creation of new materials and new integrated matter, the study of biotech, and the study of cognotech, which is how can our minds improve. And all three of these areas have had slow progress recently, but they're poised to move faster, and I anticipate many Nobel Prizes. Recently, of course, there was a Nobel Prize for AI helping solve a long-standing biotechnological problem with protein folding. That is just the beginning. As a result, AI does have huge potential for change. And I'm saying this so we don't get misled just by what AI can do today. Our plans must be adaptable and agile enough to cope with new AI capabilities coming sooner than most people expect. But it's not just potential for new materials and new interactions. It's also potential for many things going wrong, sadly. We can be misled by AI, we can be confused by AI, we can be manipulated by AI. Which leads me to my final trend, which is one thing's going to be even more important in the near future: wise human judgment. And we haven't been very wise, sadly, in the last few years. We have been misled far too often. So that is now possible. So then, how does this apply in the field of AI? And very briefly, I'm going to talk about 7 ways that AI could boost water resilience. And I'll say in advance that the seventh is, in my view, the most impactful and most dramatic. First, it can be used for improving the cleaning and filtering of wastewater with new chemicals, with new materials, with new sensors. Secondly, it can improve the desalination plants. Desalination is an expensive, energy intensive operation, but there are prospects for doing this better with the help of AI. Third, AI can detect and monitor using multiple sources of information where underground water reserves are. It can combine information from GPS satellites, from local gravity variations, and multiple other sensors. Fourth, and this is huge, there is the potential for AI to give much better advice on how to irrigate. There's so much water that's used in irrigation, which sadly is often wasted, is unnecessary, and the potential savings here are enormous. To know when does soil actually need more water, when will the water have the best effect. Fifth, there's improvements to smart urban grids to detect much more quickly where there are leaks and how the leaks can be fixed, and to adjust the pricing dynamically. And sixth, this is more speculative, there's the possibility for taking water out of the atmosphere by so-called atmospheric water harvesting. Now I've left, I think, the most important to last. Item number 7 is that AI will be giving us inspired strategic advice. In the future, if you want to find out how AI can improve water, the best thing to do is not to hire an expensive human consultant. The best thing to do will be to talk to AI itself, because it will be aware of all the publications, it will be aware of all the ideas, and it will frequently put the information together better than ever before. So that is 7 reasons, I think, why AI stands to significantly improve water resilience in India and indeed elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. I think you've painted a very optimistic picture, and we will come to that in our moderator discussion. Sujit, over to you. Please share your opening reflections.
Thank you. Hi. Can you guys hear me? Hello? Yeah, much better. Thank you. A fascinating presentation from David. So I think it'll be safe for me to say I'm less of a futurist and probably more of a generalist when it comes to talking about water. So I'm more of I see myself as a digital plumber, probably a good metaphor to have for today's topic, building infrastructure with no sense of what the solutions can be built on top of it. And that's probably a sentiment that I carry as a way of thinking. And I like to, recall what David started with, saying future is getting increasingly harder to predict. And I think one of the biggest principles of the DPI infrastructure thinking is to build for optionality. And then you can only build for optionality when you stop thinking about, abdicating the sense of assurance that you can curate solutions to allowing for an ecosystem to let solutions emerge, especially for complex problems like water. They're deeply, deeply convoluted. Of course, to many it's political. You said it's going to be a risk multiplier, Shruti, so I completely see that potential, and it cuts across multiple aspects of how we live as a society, as a humanity, as a country, as a state. So I think in matters like these, one of the things we try to do is how do you make something available as an infrastructure that allows for context-specific solutions to emerge, unbeknownst to us today. And that's one of the principles in which digital infrastructure thinking, or the DPI thinking, that I had the good fortune of being part of in the last 15 years. Now, if I were to bring that perspective into the conversation today, particularly on AI and water, probably I'll split that too and add my perspectives before I bring them together. Firstly, on the AI side, I agree with David that it's fascinating progress in the capability. We are seeing all the beta tests and the capabilities that are happening. I have no doubt in my mind that we're going to see increasingly phenomenal capability on the learning and the reasoning capabilities of the machines. But it also today, at least for the moment right now, and I'm sure it's something that will be discussed in the AI summit through the week, is that we are currently dealing with, at least on the AI side, a good fair amount of supply side hysteria and a little bit of the demand side gains yet to be seen, especially for crucial sensitive matters like sustainability water, and other critical needs of the society. And that hysteria, in a way, it's good because it's really creating technologies that's constantly improving. It's almost like I take this analogy of we are building a better sun every day, just that we as humanity are falling behind in making utilization of that sun better, right? So I think there is a raging improvement in that on the supply side, but I think demand side has to catch up. And one of the reasons why demand side uh, is kind of falling behind, and quite naturally so, we'll see that for a few more years, is one, a way of harnessing, diffusing the supply side capabilities into the demand side. I think the diffusion is one of the biggest problems. We probably don't know. We're still sort of dealing with how to make that happen. But more importantly, the supply side hysteria is also elevating the demand side risks, because it's one thing to say that my model can do everything, just give me all the data, but it's for the consumer, the demand side consumers of AI who's bearing all the risks. So, and the risk is not effectively priced, and therefore is creating a whole lot of uncertainty. So AI is adding to the uncertainty in over and top of the uncertainty we have in the problem itself. So that's one perspective I want to bring in. The other perspective is that AI literally feeds on data. I mean, it feeds on data, and one of the other risks we are seeing with adoption is the real poverty of data and its availability, especially for critical sectors. It's not that there's no data, just that they're so islanded, they're so kind of fragmented with no verifiability, no trust, no structure that gives you a sense of reducing the cost of bringing that data into play for AI. And I think that's one of the things that I see as one of the biggest challenges we need to address. And some of the work we are doing with Beckett, we recently launched a paper called the Decentralized Data Marketplaces, is to reduce that cost of discoverability, trust, verifiability of any data set, and making that data available while retaining the autonomy and agency of that local community, of the data holder, as a country, as a society, as an individual, to make sure it's available for AI to harness and give back some of the things that they're looking for from the AI using that data. So it's a very important perspective to think about, and that perspective becomes doubly important when you talk about water assets and water ecosystems. I think there are multiple sort of AI waves that you will see in this area. I think David alluded to the point that AI is revolutionizing technology. So the sciences and technologies, I won't be surprised if there are more Nobel Prizes coming from these AI schools in some sense, but it is revolutionizing the sciences and the technologies in specific areas. But the area that I focus about a lot more is how does it diffuse at a population scale? Because this is a crisis that has to be met at scale. You know, one of the things that we learned with India's Digital Public Infrastructure Initiative, whether it's Aadhaar or UPI, I'm sure all living in India know how much UPI today is a population scale habit and not a technology anymore. It comes from this thinking that you fundamentally have to start thinking about not scaling what works, but about thinking about what works at scale. And I think the complexity with water is the point where we need to elevate ourselves to think about what works at scale. And that is where digital infrastructure thinking, not a digital solution thinking, but a digital infrastructure thinking as a way to build an open playground for numerous solutions. And I take this example of internet. There's nothing in the design of internet that would tell you that after 50 years, there will be a ChatGPT or an Amazon after 30 years. The fact that it allows emergence happen, relentlessly, I think we need to think about that sort of way to solve for optionality, and that's very, very important. And therefore, unlocking data and reducing the barriers around data, reducing the cost of trust and verifiability and discoverability of that, and that let AI diffuse faster, cheaper, better into the hands of decision makers, planners, individuals, is something that will be very crucial. I'll take two specific analogies before I hand over the floor to Shruti. I think one of the examples we're doing with the energy transition, so shifting from water into energy transition, is to give that agency to solve back to the people. So the India energy stack that's currently underway in India with Ministry of Power, one of the things we are trying to do is to make the energy consumers, people like all of us, get your own data back in verifiable credentials. All of you must be using your QR codes today, and you use your COVID passes, and some of you use DigiYatra. Think you have that data in your wallet for energy. If you have your energy consumption data, your energy connection data available, and it's in your control with all the kind of privacy norms taken care of. But if you had that, would it make it a bit more responsible for you? And it allows the ecosystems to also innovate with that. Today, the amount of data that gets stuck in institutional organizations, whether it's a local urban water distribution board or the big departments of the government or private sector for that matter, I think getting the data out, putting it in the hands of people is very, very important. Think about UPI. It was a very messy affair for any Indian in India to do payments. We were doing about 170 million transactions a month for a country as big as us 8 years ago. That's probably the size of what Portugal would do. But from there, we went to $21 billion transactions a month, just because we allowed people to find a way to engage with payment transactions and do it. So that's one example of how we can think about a DPI, machine readable, tamper-proof, verifiable, privacy secure way of sharing data back to the people and giving them the agency to participate in community, private, governmental interventions and making them an active participant in the problem. I think that's one the other. The second part is definitely about resource adequacy, resource efficiencies. I've been given to understand that water resources.
Have to wrap up it.
So the last point, I think the whole point about utilization, underserved, underutilized resources. I think today with technologies like AI and aspects like tokenization, you can bring some of these water assets back into play and make them attract faster, cheaper, better investments by creating an open rails to make that happen. So these are some of the ways in which we could think about bringing AI into play for problem complexity of water. Back to you. Thank you.
So thank you, Sujit. We will now move on to our moderated discussion where we explore both the themes discussed by you and David. But I want to really start with discussing the whole system with you. And starting off with the elephant in the room, which is the water footprint of AI. Again, we have all sorts of contradictory data on that, right? And it's very difficult to say what is the true data on it, right? And so we know that the world wants AI and soon AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which is again very, very water intensive, energy intensive. So what does that mean for countries like India and rest of Africa and Asia, which are actually water stressed? And how should these countries navigate it? And the questions are open to both of you. So who would like to go first?
Well, I would say that actually it is quite clear what the water usage of AI is. There are people who have looked at this very carefully, and it's quite different from what is in the press, often in a pretty hysterical way. The very best source for this, his name is Andy Masley. I'll spell that for you, A-N-D-Y, Andy Masley, M-A-S-L-E-Y. And he has lots of information to say. One of his articles is called "The AI Water Issue is Fake." Fake means that people have actually exaggerated things, knowing that they were exaggerating it, and it has misled so many people, sadly. It has made people much more angry than they need to be about the way that AI is using water. AI is using water, of course, but most of it is recirculated. So when an AI data center needs cooling, the water doesn't just get used once and thrown away, it goes round and round and round again. And it is much smaller than is used in many other industries. So there's a famous case in a county in America where the press said, "Oh my goodness, the data center is using so much water, it's outrageous." Now, in fact, the golf courses were using 30 times as much water. And should we therefore say that people should stop playing golf? And if you look at the tax contribution of these two industries in that local area, the AI industry was making many more tax contributions. I'm not saying there's no issues. There are some issues, especially more in India than in America, because there are, of course, areas in India where there are great extremes of scarcity. So we should look at them, but there are good bits of information that the water use is not the key determinant. We could talk later about the energy usage. That's more serious. These things do burn up a lot of energy, and that is a challenge. But I think the water story has been blown up out of all proportion by quite irresponsible journalists who are catering for clicks, and also by some writers who are ideologically committed to saying, hey, these big tech companies are evil. These big tech companies are not perfect. They do lots of bad things in my view, but the use of water is not in the evil category at all. It's quite manageable. Just one final point on this. Many other things use water. So if you have a 400-page book, of course that uses water to create it. How many GPT prompts could you use with the same amount of water? You can actually have more than 1 million GPT prompts for the amount of water that is used to create a single 400-page book. So shall we say, for the sake of water shortages, we'll stop creating books? Shall we stop all the other things we do with water? No. So we need to be realistic here, and there are good sources.
Thank you, David. Any reflections on that? Thoughts?
I think there's nothing much to add, but thanks for putting that in perspective, David. I think I would rather go from sinning to virtue signaling, for the extent that if there are big investments that are happening in AI anyway, as well use that to bring that investments into public water infrastructure, because they need supply of water. So maybe we should probably put them the responsibility of moving a piece of that, a small portion of that, into bringing water treatment plants, reusable water treatment plants, which end up benefiting the city and the region as much as it benefits them, because of course they need high quality water, which means that the secondary and tertiary quality of water is there for the rest of the society to use. So I would probably spin this question and saying, how can that contribute to better usage of water as a society because of the investments happening in AI? Probably that's one way, and kind of create them a situation of how they'll be able to trace and prove the responsibility side of making that water available for the rest of society through any side of water offtake credits and things like that. So I probably use that as the problem of abundance of AI and AI data centers as a way to solve the problem of the rest of society, as a benefit extraction, more than sending them to one side and of course comparing them with golf or the other areas of water consumption. But yeah, that's about it.
Okay. So just building on what David said, right? Suppose we get the plumbing of AI right, then what are the policy implications that the government needs to think about to really harness AI for water resilience?
AI for water, I think for me, fundamentally, if there is a way for regulators to bring in some sort of a public-private policy envelope for every dollar of investment you're making in AI, does it create a $0.50 of investments in the public water infrastructure as a good way of how you can allow them the space, the land, and the energy supply that they need, and also the water supply, as a way to drive that into investments. I spoke about that. So that's one, probably a policy intervention. The other policy intervention is to sort of allow for a lot more of reporting of usage of water, and use a way to sort of bring their water assets digitized and made available, and sort of use some of those as a way of bringing the other water assets in the city. So I think there's a way of bringing that, of digitization, digital infrastructure based usage, and of course thinking about creating shared water treatment plant infrastructures, and allocating at the time of less use. Especially, I mean, I understand that AI is intensive loads, but given that there can be some variable load, most of that water can be used for serving other purposes in the city. So it's more about co-development and co-investment sort of a thesis is what I would encourage the policy think about at the moment here.
I definitely agree with disclosure and transparency when it comes to the water footprint, and I agree with David that it is blown beyond proportion, but there's also a significant need to have some kind of transparency around that, because what's happening is the only way to stop having data centers coming in highly water stressed region is to firstly know what is the cost of the water that's being required there. And any thoughts on that from David around policy implications, or what the government needs to really think about when it comes to?
Well, I think that the ordinary citizen can play a role here too. We citizens are sometimes guilty for just prioritizing convenience and short-term economic boosts, whereas I think it would be much better for the whole water supply if there's much more focus on, can we really trust people? And if there are suppliers who are found out to be misleading in their data, not reporting things accurately, I would like to see a groundswell public reaction against them. Not that, hey, this is cute, this is attractive, this is low price. There should be much more focus on, let's have reliable information. And this will put more pressure on these companies. more generally, why don't we have enough data? And Sujit was earlier talking about we've had a poverty of data in this. One problem is that people did collect data and nobody could do much with it. It was just a huge morass. Well, now AI has an amazing ability to process data and make sense out of it. And so this is the time to put more sensors in place. Especially sensors can be quite low cost in many places, detecting water pressure, detecting the composition of the water, and it can detect earlier when there's something wrong with the filters. For example, the filters that are used to clean water, when do they need to be replaced? And if there is enough sensors there, we can end up with just-in-time replacement of water filters rather than them getting too old and not doing a good job or unnecessarily changing them ahead of schedule. So with more data, with AI that's interpreting that data, there's a possibility for a very positive feedback cycle, provided there is a priority on the data being reliable and trustworthy rather than being massaged and manipulated for PR purposes. So the normal citizen should be campaigning for, let's have some honesty in data, please. Let's have the businesses that we can rely on rather than just the ones who offer us some trinkets or similar.
Thank you, David. I think that's a very, very valid point and very important as well. We will now open the floor for audience Q&A. Please raise your hands if you have questions. Introduce yourself and your organization and keep your questions brief. Thank you. In the front, please.
My name is Deva Sitaram. I advise companies on technology strategy and innovation. So one thing that I want to ask you is, there are the secondary uses of water, water used for energy generation, significant amount of water is used in semiconductor manufacturing. So usually what happens is the people who are the lower end of the economic spectrum get impacted a lot more. There is a water shortage. So like one story I heard is the people in Fiji are not getting the fresh water because of the Fiji water bottle, that gets exported to Europe, right? So how do we make sure all this AI development and technology can be equitable, that again, we don't, create more wealth for very small percentage of people, but all the other, the significant percentage of the population suffer from this development. And water is a very, very basic resource. It's not like something else actually.
This is a very important question. With AI, we have the possibility for the biggest inequality of all time, sadly. AI has the ability to do so much. The successful companies with AI stand to be the wealthiest and most powerful in the history in the last many decades, maybe going back further. And so we have to be aware of this is a possible downside of AI. In the beginning, I said there are many opportunities. One of the biggest risks is that indeed it will lead to inequalities. And again, we need popular action against this. And it's not something that you or I as an individual can do. It's something we can do together. Now, on the question of which kind of water is used for all these different things, it turns out that there's different qualities of water. There's drinkable water and non-drinkable water. And for energy generation, you can get by with a lot less, lower quality of water. And so sometimes this is misled as well as part of the explanation. People say, oh, look, data centers, they use so much water because there's cooling, but also the energy generation that goes behind it to create the energy that the data center uses. Well, in that latter case, that can use lower quality water. And so, first of all, there must be citizens' pressure, and there must, of course, be politicians that listen to that and respect it, and who tax the successful companies, frankly. But also, there must be an understanding of the different qualities of water. But no, I think you're right. There are risks here, and we have to pay attention. And if we are careless, we will end up in a future that was nothing like as good as we'd hoped it would be.
Thank you, David. Do we have any other questions? Yes, please.
Hello, David, and all the panelists. This is Samrat. I am the Innovation Ambassador with the Government of India and the spokesperson of NCP. So my question is how AI can benefit the climate vulnerable communities, basically the indigenous communities who are currently suffering from the digital divide. Because from the part where I come from, like a lot of communities are facing water scarcity and other climate vulnerabilities, and the issues are somewhere also risen by the industrial interventions and the minings into that area. But that particular communities, the indigenous communities, are already facing the catastrophe of digital divide. So how AI can help them build their own climate and water resilience? Thanks.
Do you wanna-
So it's one of the things that we keep talking about. Most often we forget this part that I think one of the biggest expectations from AI is how do we raise the ground and not raise the ceiling for everybody, meet society where it is, rather than waiting for another 500 million people to get it conversant with AI. So I think one, this is a human AI interaction. Definitely, I mean that's an area. Human technology interaction is an area where significantly we need to work hard. For example, today, in a few days' time, I think you'll see a farmer doing an energy trading in India. Not because it's easy to do energy trading. Think about it. We don't even want to touch the meter if it goes wrong. But imagine a farmer actually selling energy to somebody at a tailoring lady in Delhi from Meerut. If that's happening, it's because AI is actually making the complexity of that interaction with any formal systems interactions, whether it's bureaucratic, industrial, simplified. So it kind of eases the way in which people can onboard. So I think AI divide doesn't compound digital divide doesn't compound AI divide. I think it works the other way. So I think we should use AI to solve for that. Having said that, I think for indigenous community, especially dealing with problems, it's one of those things. We need to find a way to create an infrastructure that allows for contextual solutions to emerge. The way we solve for urban water and other problems are very, very different from the way we are solving for industrial reuse of water and that for remote indigenous communities requirements of water. So this is exactly what I was trying to say. We need to build very specific contextual solutions. And for that, what could be those infrastructure building blocks that can be made available for somebody in that area to think about solutions along with the government or social entrepreneurs or anybody who's a tech enthusiast starting to work with it. I think that part requires firstly unlocking the whole data side of it. I think there is a critical data unlocking part of the building block that I think if some way we can figure that out and if there's a natural incentive for that to happen more often, maybe there are solutions that will emerge. That's one of the other ways to think about it. But I'm sure they would have.
David, would you like to add something?
Yeah, so India's problem with water isn't one of absolute scarcity. There is a lot of water, especially during the monsoon months. The problem instead is that it leaks, it's misallocated. There's so much water that is wasted in agriculture, and it's hard for me to say that because I'm not a farmer, although my grandparents were farmers. But the case is that people are following time-honored traditions of watering during the certain calendar months of the year, and that's not always appropriate. So if they can be more sensitive, there are huge amounts of water savings there. It's also huge amounts of water lost in leaks. Where I come from in the UK, it's a national disgrace. The water companies aren't doing enough to address the leaks, but I'm told it's the same here in India. And if the AI can be used to detect the leaks, that can avoid. Fixing climate change issues, I think the role of AI there is going to be to accelerate better solar energy and better wind and wave energy and make it cheaper so that everybody is happy to convert to clean energy as opposed to the dirty energy. Just preaching at people, which we did for decades, and saying, thou shalt not use dirty energy, didn't work because the dirty energy was often a lot cheaper than the clean energy. But thankfully, due to technological progress, the clean energy has now, in many cases, got a lot cheaper, and there are many wonderful jobs in the green economy. AI can accelerate that and make these things even work better. And that's probably how we can make a bigger dent on the elephant in the room, which is the accelerating climate change.
Thank you, David. Do we have any other questions? We still have 5 minutes.
Talking about water usage in your city being a disgrace, I come from a city where I just heard that the non-revenue water is as high as 34%. And I still look at why my bills so costly. I'm paying tons of money to get safe drinking water in my place, and I think I'm probably a part of the top 2% of the city that kind of has easy access to water. But it's an important point, and I think this part about observability of water usage utilization is such a critical aspect. And if AI can solve for that, I think that's a huge leg up us in addressing the other problems. We can't emphasize that anymore. It's one of the number one things. whether it's industrial, urban, and others, I think having observability of water utilization is so critical, and solving for leaks becomes a very important one too. And it's like a low-hanging fruit that we can always go at first.
Thank you, Sujit. Oh, we have one question.
So what we have seen in the human history is if one group of people get a very powerful technology, right? They kind of dominate and take the resources of all the other communities, like what happened in the European colonization. Sorry to bring up an unpleasant aspect of the history, but they were able to do the industrial revolution, and you know what the rest happened to Africa and Asia. So how do we guarantee that the same thing, because the same kind of asymmetry, the people who can use the AI, who have access to AI and AGI. In fact, a couple of people from Google quit, saying that the AGI is already available within Google, and I don't know how true it is or whatever. But my question remains, right? I mean, you can't say that a colonization did not happen and there were very bad consequences, right? So how do we ensure that the same thing is not going to be repeated with such a very powerful technology, that can fundamentally alter the human history?
Sometimes, of course, technologies start off and only used by the rich and powerful, and then later get spread more widely. That was very much my experience in the smartphone industry. When I started with smartphones in the late 1990s, there were a very small number of people who used them, and they were really expensive. And now they've become so all over the place. So that is the desirable trend, that the benefits of AI will come to everybody. But you're entirely right. There's nothing predetermined about it, and there's plenty of bad examples as well. And the solution isn't always economics, because it's often better for these large companies to keep their inequalities in place. The solution has to be politics. And politics has sometimes worked, at least on the national level. So in the Americans, in the late 1800s and early 1900s, they broke up the large trusts. They broke up the various large corporations, the trust busting. This is the Sherman Act. Teddy Roosevelt and others did it, and they stopped the individual large companies having too much power. Now, that doesn't apply to the case that you mentioned, which was individual countries throwing their weight around in very destructive and very regrettable ways, which is why we're going to need not just better politics, but dare I say it, better geopolitics. And the role that India can have on the international stage, I think, is really incredible, because India straddles the worlds of having a lot of underdeveloped, but having a lot of marvelous development too. So I think India needs to speak up on the world stage, as it is doing by hosting this amazing event, in fact, and emphasizing, it is a very sad future if we end up with this inequality. It's actually worse for the oligarchs too, because although the oligarchs may be wealthy, they have to live in a state of perpetual security. It will be better for everybody if we really can share this around. But it's not going to happen by default. It's going to need politics and geopolitics to make it happen.
So one of the things, just to add to what David said, I think it's one thing to think about AGI and the rage of abundant intelligence, and the other thing to talk about the usability of it. I think usability is very contextual, right? I think there will be enough use cases where I think they can attract a lot more capital and attention, and that's going to crowd out capital for the rest of the use cases. That's a big risk, but it also doesn't mean that that's the only way. You can think about adapting AI. So which is a point that I earlier mentioned, that it's up to the country, not of course political alignments are important, but also think of a way of how do you make this diffusion happen in a way that it's non-exclusive and non-driverless. Creating open rails is fundamentally important, and I think it's fair to say that India has built infrastructure where nobody has a kill switch. I mean, think about it, nobody has a kill switch on any of this infrastructure. So, I mean, if one of the big UPI apps goes down, it doesn't mean that the UPI is down. I mean, there are 200 other apps that you can use with. So, we've been building open rails. So, this whole techno-legal approach of building that sovereign sort of a sense of autonomy and control around how we bring this technology into the society is an important way of thinking. And that's one of the approaches in which we can probably make sure a more equitable distribution of the value of AI and more contextual applications of it. I mean, it's a very important consideration. I'm sure some of that will be discussed during the summit.
Well, thank Thank you both for sharing your insights. I'm sure you've given enough food for thought to the audience. Now, moving on to the closing reflections. The Prime Minister of India will be here. What message do you want to give him and the business leaders, the political parties when it comes to AI and water? And you both have 3 minutes each. So, you want to go first?
Message for the political leaders, Indian Prime Minister? Well, I will say what I said at the beginning. AI is going to provide many new opportunities that are even more than today. You make sure you have people studying them, but studying them with their eyes really paying attention, not to be misled by all the hype. There is a heck of a lot of hype that is misleading, but that doesn't mean to say the whole subject is wrong. In fact, the subject has enormous possibilities. So you need to understand it. You need to understand also that as well as bringing incredible opportunities, there are huge risks. The energy risk is one. There are people who could use their AI to do all kinds of bad things, not just bad from a business point of view, that business that ignores the environment or ignores externalities. People could use the same technology differently. I've been talking about using the technology to make things cleaner. Somebody could use a variant of that technology to make the water more polluted than before. Why would somebody do that? Well, most of us wouldn't, but there are a few people, sadly, who are like that. So that's what AI could do if there are no guardrails on it. So my message for the Indian Prime Minister is, you better be sure there are appropriate guardrails on this. If we have the guardrails, it's an incredible future. The other thing I would say is that you've got to design for agility here. It's already said in the beginning by Surjit, this is so many changes happening. People have got to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. They've got to design for change. You've got to expect the unexpected. And that requires emotional resilience rather than just water resilience. It requires a drawing on a depth of values and culture, which the Indian nation has historically been very good at. So it shouldn't lose that ability to cope with disruption. It should keep that underlying emotional resilience. And unless you can do this, you will not get the full benefits of this technology.
Thank you, David. I hope the business leaders and politicians are listening. That was a very sound advice. Sujit.
I'll probably keep it under a minute, but building on what David just said, if this is an opportunity to say this to the Prime Minister, one, I think water resilience is a complex problem. It is therefore okay to not have all the answers. Okay, number one. Number two, I think, and because it's so uncertain in its evolution, I would say that it is also tad unfair for only government to think of this as a problem to solve. I think there should be a way to distribute this solving to the larger population, citizens, whether it's activism or by participation in a formal way. How do you distribute that solvability to industries, citizens, society is an important way to think about it. And one way of doing that is to set up open rails with safeguards and allow for innovation to happen at scale. And to make that innovation happen and to get the value of AI, you got to solve for the data silos. And the way you solve for data silos is to make people give it back to the people, the data and the others, and make it more transparent, more verifiable, more trustable. Once you have that possible, I think you're reducing the cost of innovation that can happen on top of it, and innovation not just by a few, but by many across civil society, government, and markets. And that's one of the ways in which you want to set the playground and not look at solving the problem all by yourself.
Thank you. And now, just moving to the key takeaways from this session. There are so many important points, but I think one point that has resonated with both speakers is strengthening of the data architecture. That is important for harnessing AI for water resilience. So that's number one. I think another one is, seeing water sector as a beneficiary of AI and, maybe soon AGI. And also related to that is having the right kind of policies, so stringent policies around disclosure of water footprint. Because without that, effective planning is impossible. And then obviously building the future-ready infrastructure for it. That's where Sujit's expertise comes in. And also repositioning blue infrastructure as foundational. So investors should treat this infrastructure as a core economic asset. As we said, this is something which drives global stability. And done right, I think both the speakers have painted a very optimistic and practical picture. So done right, AI won't strain our water system, it will strengthen it. And I think India has a unique opportunity to show the world how it can be done right. And with that, we will conclude today's session. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you, the audience. We will have our QR codes displayed on the screen. If you want to learn more about ICFS, we're based out of London. We have some of our research papers right at the back, so please make sure you check them out as well. Do we have the slides coming? That's all right. There's something wrong with the slides. Please check out the research papers. Okay, we have it now. Please follow our website, LinkedIn, and if you are interested to become a member, please scan the QR code. Thank you once again, and have a great day ahead. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sujeet. Lovely to meet you.
Good questions.
Thank you. Can I get your
Sure, yes. Oh, right. Well, we had some successes and we had some failures. Well, we learned a lot and we did quite well for 10 years. Yeah. Yes, please do. You're based in Bangalore, yeah. That's where I used to visit most of all. That was Symbiote's office. But I have been from. Maybe I'll take a contest from. Yes.
We have two pictures. That's okay. Thanks once again. This is for you, actually. It's very great.